Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to From Pain Point to On Point. I'm your host, Britt, and I am so excited to have you back here today because we're going to talk about my favorite Bartle player type, the socializer. And it's my favorite because I am one. And I said this about the explorer player type, and it was true that they are very often misunderstood. It is also true that socializers are often misunderstood. Really, the only people that sales managers understand are killers and achievers, but whatever. I'm also excited because I still have my tiny mic, except now my tiny mic, if you're listening to this and not watching this, you don't see this tiny microphone, but now my tiny mic has a little cover, like a boom, like it's a boom mic. It has like a little microphone cover. And it also has, well, it could be a clip or it could be a stand, whatever you prefer. I think I'm going to use it as a clip and I'm not going to hold the tiny microphone this entire time. I'm just going to clip it to my shirt. I did a test with this earlier and it did work. So 1 second while I mic myself up. Okay, there we go. You guys can still see it. Good. Okay. So today, oh man, I'm so excited. I love the socializer player type. I feel like this is going to be an episode in which I feel very vindicated as a child. Not to make this a therapy session, but there are some real parallels to some report cards that I received as a kid, as there are for socializers in sales teams and just in business in general. So this is an exciting day for me and excited to talk about socializers with you guys and tell you why we're so friggin' great. Even though I'm not a seller, I'm technically in marketing, but you know what I mean. All right. So let's let's just as a preliminary kind of like opening, right? Before we kind of dive in a little bit too deep here. Let's just let's call out the truth. Okay. Let's hold space for defying gravity. I'm just joking. Let's hold space for the truth about socializers. This is going to be a real crusade for me, and I can already tell, so I apologize to everybody. Socializers, they are very often the chatty Cathy's on your team. They're very often kind of like the jokesters. They love to, it's kind of like their own personal comedy hour, if you will, whenever they have to present anything, which I know very well. Whether or not you think I'm funny, it doesn't really matter, but it's my comedy hour and I have the tiny microphone. But socializers are, especially in a business setting and in a professional setting, it is not just about talking. It's not just about yapping just to yap. There is strategy involved here, right? They are collaborative, and I think that is so true, and I can speak to that personally, that it is socializers love to work with other people. They love to be collaborative. They love to have shared goals, which doesn't always necessarily tie into sales that well necessarily. How many times can I say necessarily? But they are in the same way that explorers are kind of like this hidden, kind of underutilized resource on your team. Socializers are the same thing. In the way that explorers are constantly trying to get insights and develop new strategies, and they're doing lots of research and stuff like that. Socializers are the ones that they are building team morale. They are connecting your team together with shared goals. They're building trust, not just with your team and your company, but also with customers and prospects. So they're not your typical kind of lone wolf closer, but they are the salespeople that are going to get you customers for life, right? They're going to develop relationships with prospects. Those prospects are going to convert and they're going to be on board for as long as that champion stays at that company. Just joking. Well, I'm actually not joking. That's kind of true. This is what we're going to tackle today. We're going to tackle how we can identify a socializer. We're going to figure out what makes them tick. We are going to figure out how their motivation style is different from the motivation styles of the other Bartle player types that we've talked about, how they fall into the middle performer band and what that means. And we're also going to we're gonna do some comparisons with the other Bartle player types. And another thing that we're going to talk about today, which is a little bit different from some of the other episodes that we've talked about, is we're going to start talking a little bit about AI. And we're going to talk about AI more often as we continue this podcast because it just seems to be something that we cannot escape. AI is everywhere. It's being integrated in all of our platforms. It is an incredibly useful tool. It can be for me, a little scary, but we want to start talking about this. We want to start incorporating this. It's really important that we start to discuss together as a group what the impact AI will have on sales, right? I think that's what this entire podcast is about sales and how to impact sales and in a positive way. So we're going to talk about AI a little bit and kind of how they can benefit from the use of AI and the best ways to leverage AI with your socializers. And we'll continue to talk about AI in regards to the player types and also just how sales can leverage AI in the best way without removing that really crucial human element of sales, right? Because sales is ultimately it's a human to human connection, and that is what creates great sellers. And that is why socializers are great sellers. So let's dive in. Let's get into it. Okay, so very quick recap. If you're new, if you haven't listened to the original Barter Player episode, if you haven't listened to the Explorer episode, Socializer is one of the 4 Bartle player types. These types come from a gaming psychology taxonomy, but they really apply so well to sales teams. Honestly, it's kind of creepy, kind of freaky how Richard Bartle did that. And the socializer is the person that really thrives on relationships. They want connection, they want collaboration, they want community. So in in the context of sales, what that looks like is that socializers are motivated by winning together. They love a team goal. They love recognition from their peers, and they love to build meaningful connections with customers, with prospects, and with their teammates. So, like I said before, not your lone wolf sellers. They're not the people that are just going to hit their quota and get out of there and go on vacation to Bermuda. Socializers are the ones that want to organize your team lunches. They want to spend time understanding the person behind the deal. They know that their champion's son has a soccer game on Saturday. And that's not a bad thing. It's a great thing, actually, justice for socializers, because socializers are relationship builders. And that is what sales is all about. Sales is all about building relationships and developing this human connection. And their power isn't being able to hammer out 100 cold emails or being able to make the most phone calls in an hour. Their real strength and their focus is creating meaningful touch points with prospects and with customers that turn into lasting trust. So this is kind of the rub here, is that socializers do often get a bad rap, and managers can often mistake them for being unproductive or distracted because they spend a lot of time talking. This is literally exactly what my middle school teachers used to put on my report cards. Brittney's a great student, but she talks too much. And to that I say, I built a career off of it. Now I have a podcast. So let's just start with this. If you have a socializer on your team, the goal here, and same with explorers as well, right? We talked about them last week or 2 weeks ago, but the goal here is that you need to recognize that the value that they bring to your team is different, but it is not lesser than. It is not less important than closing the deals. And I know that seems counterintuitive because it's always going to be, we've got to close deals. But, and again, we talked about this in the previous episode where we talked about explorers. This is really about reinforcing the behavior that you want to see out of your sellers to get to that ultimate goal. It is not about gamifying the goal. It is not about gamifying revenue as a goal, because that is already a goal. That is already a target that your teams are trying to hit. This is all about how do we acknowledge, how do we recognize the behaviors that allow our teams, that allow our individual players on our teams to get to those goals, right? How do we foster their success based on the type of person that they are, the way that they want to work, the way that they want to learn that makes them the most successful? I think that we've all kind of experienced this you get put into a box type of mentality at a job, and it really just doesn't fit with the way that you work. I think as awful and horrific as that was, it did bring everybody home, and that allowed them to kind of figure out their working style a little bit, right? Whether you're somebody that works really well first thing in the morning and you're the most productive from like 6 to 10 a.m. versus people who, they do their morning meetings, they take a little break, they get back to it at night, et cetera, et cetera, right? It's kind of the same thing. Tapping into the way that individuals can be the most productive that they can be while also still feeling this sense of ownership and autonomy over the way that they work, right? So as like a little comparison between the other Bartle player types, which I think is kind of helpful, if we were to compare socializers to achievers, we would say that achievers are more of your goal-oriented folks. They like to crush their quotas. They want the trophy. Whereas socializers really want to celebrate with the team. They want really big team activities. They want big team wins. That's kind of like their main focus and goal. With killers, they're super competitive. They want to win. They want to win visibly. They want everybody to know that they've won. Whereas socializers, they're also competitive, but again, it's within a team mindset. And I know I think that we're talking about team a lot, and that feels like you need to do the entire team. And depending on how big your sales organization is, that can seem daunting. But you could do competitions or challenges just with a handful of folks, 3 or 4 people, right? And give them that goal, and that also works. And then lastly, explorers. Explorers, they dig into the why behind the processes and the strategies and the data, and they love discovery. And socializers, they also love discovery. They very much love discovery, but they really like to discover more about people. Socializers are people. So they really they do like to do the research. They do like to kind of get their hands dirty in that way, but it's not necessarily doing, they're not Googling market trends necessarily. They want to speak to real people directly, and they want to get that information firsthand, and they want to be able to dig in with a real person. So this is kind of a little bit why socializers can be labeled as distracted or as perpetual talkers. But that really, I think, and feel deeply that misses they really excel at creating emotional connection. And that makes them really strong in industries where trust and developing trust is the main driver for closing a deal. And I think, off the top of my head, I can tell you, insurance, real estate, banking, big industries that require a lot of trust because you're buying these products that are going to deeply impact your life for the rest of your life. Very different from kind of like any other type of product selling, right? So that is going to be those are industries, and obviously there are many more, but those are industries in which socializers are going to be really excellent because they are going to be able to really make those human to human connections that are so important to building the relationship that allows people to buy from them. So if we were to take an example, oh, I'm so nervous that my little microphone is going to fall off of my shirt. Maybe I should hold her. I don't know. I'll keep her here for now. So if we were to take real estate as an example, a socializer isn't going to just show the house and close the deal, right? These are going to be the agents that remember their customers' kids' soccer schedule, that they're going to know that their kid has a soccer game on Saturday. They're going to show up with a housewarming gift that has their favorite bottle of wine because they mentioned it to them, 2 showings prior. And that is really important, I think, and that's really meaningful because it's not fluff and it's not fake. It's it is strategic and it is relationship building and it is those types of relationships that lead to referrals. And I think, and another aspect that is kind of relevant to a lot of different industries is renewals, right? There are a lot of industries in which renewals are a constant thing, and those can be really difficult to get. And socializers are just the best at them. They are the best at renewals because they maintain that relationship. They maintain the trust and they are authentic in their touch points with those prospects and with those customers. I actually think a lot about we have an account manager on our team named Vidar, and Vidar is the renewal king. So is another one of our CS people, our CS managers, Marie. She's excellent at renewals. And it's really because they're both socializers. They both love to engage with people. And, Vidar especially is just so good at creating these connections and really taking seriously his customers' concerns and their needs. He's so invested in making sure that his customers are getting what they need and that it's being done in a timely manner and that it's being followed up on. And it is so evident how appreciated that is by his customers because they are constantly renewing. They are always the ones that are jumping at the chance to give a customer story or a quote. You can just really tell that. And when I get onto a call with Vidar and a customer, I can't get off of the call without that customer talking about how wonderful Vidar is. And I think it's so true. I think that his ability to connect with customers is really almost unparalleled, and he does such a great job at it. So it's it is a skill that can seem very superficial and maybe a little bit trivial, and even at times like kind of like, what the hell are you doing? But in the long run, it really does prove out to be successful. And there's a lot that we have gained as a company by having Vidar be such a strong socializer and in a myriad of different ways. So it's hugely important Bartle player type. So let's talk about what motivates socializers now that I've stopped waxing poetic about Vidar, whom I love. Let's let's talk about what motivates socializers. And so we'll through the framework of intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. So intrinsically, and I would argue that socializers are more intrinsic motivated than extrinsic. They are driven by connection, they are driven by collaboration, and they are driven by being part of something bigger than them. And man, oh man, I cannot, as a socializer myself, I cannot agree with this more. I think that this is so true. I talk about this all the time. It's the reason why I took the job at SalesScreen, is because I wanted to be a part of something bigger, something better. I wanted to be able to make an impact. I wanted to make a connection. And here I am. Extrinsically, they do love recognition, and we do. We do love recognition. But we don't care about money. We don't really care about money. We don't really care about trophies. We don't really care about winning. That's not the type of recognition we want. We want peer-to-peer recognition. We want people to see the work that we do and appreciate the work that we do and to be celebrated for that. So it's really less about being recognized in the way that achievers or killers like to be recognized. This is really about being recognized for who we are as people. But here is kind of the kicker, and I think this is what makes it hard for managers sometimes to really see the value of a socializer on their team, and that is that socializers very often live in the middle performer range. And the reason why is because they're consistent. They're not going to hit the high highs of the achievers or your killers. That's not really what they do. They're not going after the white whale of customers, but they are really dependable relationship builders. And those relationships deliver results over time. And so with the right support, middle performer socializers can drive massive team success. And we'll get into the middle performer of it all in just a minute. But let's talk about how we can engage a socializer so that they don't feel undervalued. Because if you don't give them the opportunity to shine, then they can lose. They can motivation just in the dumps. So first up, recognition that fits them, right? Like I said, not hunting for trophies. They care about the team win. So shout them out, but tie them back to the relationships that they've built. So for an example, just as an example here, Jenny brought in 2 renewals this month because she's always checking in and delivering value to her clients. That's a perfect way of shouting out a socializer, highlighting the skill that got them the renewals, and showing that they are bringing value and bringing impact. The second is team competitions. So, and we've talked about this already, but we will beat the dead horse, which is that socializers want to collaborate. They do not want to do head-to-head competitions. And is actually, I'm really unlocking something about myself in this podcast episode, you guys. We have something in SalesScreen called battles. Battles are very cool. They're head-to-head competitions. You can battle on, any KPI, any metric, whatever. And the way that it works is that the user would challenge someone to a battle. And then that gets put up on the TV screens if you have them in your office, and it gets spread out on the feed so everybody on the team knows that a battle is going on. That is not the most fun thing for socializers. And I know this because I've only engaged in 3 battles in SalesScreen and I've lost all of them. And it's because I just didn't like it. But socializers want the team element. They want a team competition. They want to be collaborative. So don't do the battles for socializers. Do the team competitions for socializers. And if you wanted to even as a target, this is also something that we have in SalesScreen. And again, this is not, you can do this without SalesScreen, but we also have a multi-target competition that you can set up your teams, and then you can have multiple targets that the team has to hit in order to get to the final goal. Those are also a really great way to engage socializers, is to kind of give them incremental wins. That can also be very helpful. So the third thing is to create opportunities for peer mentoring. Socializers are great at sharing knowledge because they love connection. And if you pair them with new hires, they are the perfect people to show the ropes to. They will run workshops, they will show them around the office, they will bring them with them on client meetings and client calls. They're great little helpers when it comes to onboarding. And again, I will say this is another thing that really resonates with me as a socializer. I'm building an entire sales enablement program for next year because I just love I love to yap, but I love to teach. So, and I also this podcast. So there we go. And then finally, you want to tie their metrics to relationship building outcomes. So again, we've talked about this, and we're going to talk about it even more. I'm going to have our CEO, Sindra, on the podcast next year, and we're going to do an entire episode about gamifying behaviors versus results. But the key here is to not just track revenue. Measure renewals, measure referrals, measure client satisfaction scores. If socializers are able to see how their relationship building is kind of moving the needle for the team or moving the needle for the company, then they will double down on that. So hugely, hugely helpful for sales managers to be able to, and maybe you're already tracking renewals and referrals, or maybe you kind of have those metrics maybe a little bit scattered on your team. You're not owning, your field sales are not owning renewals, and your marketing team is owning referrals or word of mouth leads, etc. But having all of those metrics kind of tied together and available for your socializers to pull upon is going to be really helpful in one, you as a sales manager recognizing their impact on the team, but also giving the motivation and the proof that their relationship building is having an impact and being helpful for the team. So as like a final thing on how to motivate socializers, I would also say, just as a quick caveat for all my managers listening, don't punish your socializers for talking too much. If they are chatting with customers or if they're coaching teammates, they're adding value. They just are. Obviously, if they're just at the water cooler, then gossiping about The Bachelor or whatever hot new show the kids are watching these days. Obviously that's something to redirect, but they're chatty Cathys and they're chatty Cathys for a strategic reason. So foster that strategic reason. So getting back to middle performers, I want to talk about this a little bit more because I think it's really important to recognize that explorers and socializers, and even at times achievers, can fall into your middle performer band on a team. And understanding, one, what that means, why are they falling into that middle performer band, but also how can you motivate them to either excel out of that middle performer band and maybe not live in the top spot all the time, but at least get them a little bit out. So socializers do sit in that middle zone more often than not. And the reason being genuinely is because they are consistent. They are consistent, they are dependable, and they are relationship driven. And so they will not be your quota topping number one head honcho superstars. Maybe they will land a white whale and they will get into the top spot, but that is not going to be consistent. What will be consistent is developing those relationships, having referral deals come in, being, really staying solidly kind of like within their lane because they are the most consistent relationship focused reps. And middle performers are, they're the backbone of most sales teams. They make up the majority of your team, and socializers really sit in the center of that backbone. So it's not a bad thing. It's really not a bad thing. But you can elevate those socializers and those middle performers with a couple of different ways. One would be by giving them team focused roles. So have them organize a client event, a client dinner, or help them with onboarding, like we had mentioned before. You can assign them long-term accounts or bigger accounts. Socializers are good in enterprise situations because they are fostering connections with a lot of different people on that team, not just your champions. And usually enterprise customers are going to stick around a lot longer because moving business it's a difficult thing. Most enterprise companies are signing multi-year contracts depending on the industry that you're in. So having a socializer at the helm of that is usually pretty helpful. It's also really helpful too because we do find that, and this is just something that we find at SalesScreen, is that sometimes you can have a champion in a deal and that champion pushes it over the edge and you get that customer and you sign that customer and that's great. And then that champion leaves for whatever reason. They go off into greener pastures and there really wasn't anyone else that could pick up that flag, right? And socializers really don't allow that to happen because they create champions with everyone that they talk to because they are invested, not just in selling the deal, but they're invested in the people that they're talking to. They are creating connections with the people that they're talking to. So it is easier to get buy-in from other people on the buying team when you have a socializer that's engaging with them because they do develop those connections with that person and they want to have those connections with that person. So very, very helpful for kind of like these long-term, larger accounts to have a socializer somewhere in the mix to kind of help develop and foster relationships with everyone that is meaningful to the deal. And then last little tip I'd give would be encouraging them to share best practices with others. So, essentially putting them in the role of a mentor, whether that be through onboarding or, as like an onboarding buddy to new hires, or, maybe even, we said this as a tip for our explorers in our explorer episode, but it would also be a great opportunity for socializers to do some team training. If there's something that they're particularly passionate about or something that they're really good at, team training is also another way that you can engage socializers in a way that really feeds their need to be collaborative and to be impactful. So if you can harness these middle performing socializers, you can really turn them into the glue that holds your team together. And if you engage them, then you're going to have a really strong pipeline. Your customers are going to be happy, and your team morale is going to be really high because socializers are really good at hyping up their team. That's another thing that socializers are so important for, and I think can be an often overlooked element, I think, is like culture and morale. And socializers are so great at making other people feel good and making other people feel welcomed. And they can have such an impact on the overall feeling on the team and the culture of your sales team and the morale and the motivation. Like they they do a really good job of connecting with people and making them feel like they're supposed to be there. And so it's one of those things, and I think maybe also we've all kind of experienced this as well, where you have worked at a job which maybe you haven't loved for whatever reason, whatever the reason is, it's not what you want to be doing with your career, or you don't really like the product that you're selling, or the hours are bad, or whatever the case is. But like it has great culture. It has great culture. It has people that you really love to see all the time, that you enjoy interacting with on a day to day. And that kind of is is glue. That helps you stay. I can't remember where this quote is from, and I should probably have Googled it before I started doing this podcast. But there was a quote that I had seen, that I had read, that I know somewhere, somehow in my brain, which is that people don't leave jobs for money. It can come down to money, and it usually does come down to money, but that is not the very first thing, right? That's money is the last line of defense when it comes to leaving a job. There's so many more elements that come before that. So, and a big part of that is culture. A huge part of that is culture. A huge part of that is feeling welcomed, feeling like you belong, feeling like you're going into work and it's positive and energetic in a good way. And socializers can really help foster and build out that really excellent culture that helps reduce turnover and keeps reps excited and happy about coming into work. Okay, so now that I'm off of my soapbox a little bit, I don't know if I'll ever be off of my soapbox when it comes to socializers, social justice for socializers. But let's talk a little bit about AI. I had promised that we'd talk about AI in the beginning of this, and I'm not going to forget that promise. And it's a good segue talking about how socializers are so human and that they are really invested in human connection, and that is what gets them excited and that's what gets them to be the most productive. It brings out their most productive self. So AI, like on its face, may not seem like the most natural tool for socializers to use. And, to a degree, it's kind of not, right? It can be a really incredible tool, but there has to be a way to make it personal, right? So there are definitely ways that you can incorporate AI into your sales strategy, and that can really alleviate some admin work on your sales team. But that is never going to replace the one-to-one human connection that a socializer is going to want to develop with their prospects and customers. They don't want it to be robotic. They do not want to have just an AI tool thrown in their face because they're going to resist it. And they do. I did not use ChatGPT for like a year and a half after it came out, something like that. Like I remember my dad talking to me about ChatGPT years ago and me being like, no, I don't want it. AI is scary. And AI is still scary. In fact, arguably AI is way scarier now than it was before. But now I use ChatGPT and a couple of other different AI tools. And I'm not going to give away my secrets, but I use a couple of different AI tools now, and it is so hugely helpful. But as a socializer, I am always going to want to go in and put my own spin on things. And that's not just because sometimes AI can spit out some really weird stuff, but that is also because I want to sound like myself, and I do want to feel like I'm making a human connection with anything that I write or that I put out or anything. So when it comes to socializers and implementing AI tools, I think there are definitely ways that you can incorporate AI into your sales strategy that are going to help and push forward goals, but they are also, socializers specifically, are also going to want more ways to connect authentically with their customers and their prospects. Great. This is another long podcast episode, and I am sorry, you guys, but you know me, I'm just a socializer and I stay yapping. But we covered a lot today. We covered how to identify socializers on your team, how to engage with them, middle performers, why they fit into that band. So, if I had to give you a takeaway, if I had to give you one takeaway from this episode, well, you tell me what the takeaway is. I think you can comment below and tell me what you think the takeaway is. But my takeaway is that socializers aren't distractions. I wish I could, oh man, I wish I remembered any of my middle school teachers' names. Socializers, they're not distractions. They're the glue. They're your morale boosters. They're your relationship builders. And if you support them, then you're going to make your team way stronger, way better. So again, I say justice for socializers. All right, guys, that is it for me. I'm tired of hearing my own voice. I'm going to go. But I hope you guys have a great next 2 weeks. Next podcast episode is going to be about achievers. We're going to deep dive into achievers. So that will be fun. And I will see you next time.